Steve, in the 90s, Al Gore,
I remember him,
former vice president of the United States, put out a documentary called An Inconvenient Truth.
Right.
And in that documentary, he introduced the United States to an incredible amount of information about global warming. This was the first time most of us really heard about it.
He definitely raised the profile of global warming as an issue significantly. He wasn't the first person to talk about it. I remember Carl Sagan, warning about it in the 80s, more than a decade earlier, and he wasn't the first one to talk about it either. But that was when it became political, right? Al Gore made it a political topic.
Yeah.
Like this is something that, and this became the centerpiece of his presidential run, after, he was vice president. I think you could look back at that, at An Inconvenient Truth, and some things were overcalled, certainly. But the broad brushstroke was basically correct, and here we are 25 years, basically a quarter of a century later, and, we're in the middle of what is probably going to be the hottest year on record this year. We had June was the hottest June on record. There were heat records being broken all over the place, which again, climatologists completely predicted, right? So not only, was it predicted, again, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and increasingly so with increasing accuracy. But if we go back to just like whatever the last 20 years or so, the climatologists had pretty much dialed in, this is about how much warming we're going to get depending on variables about like how much CO2 we continue to release. And their predictions have been remarkably accurate. It's all within the error bars.
Yeah, and it's only been getting more accurate as the decades go by.
It's been getting more accurate, absolutely.
But this is the year, like last year, yes, but this right now, this is the year where I think it's the holy shit moment.
That's because of El Nino.
Yeah.
Right? So on top of the background increasing of average temperatures, there's an El Nino La Nina cycle. We're just coming out of a La Nina effect, which is partially masking the background warming effect, the anomalous warming effect, as we call it. And now we're in an El Nino year where we're getting sort of a maximal temperatures on top of the background anomalous warming. And so this is so this year is going to break all records, right? Maybe next year too. And then it'll calm down for a year or two, and then we'll have so this cycle has been happening, so we're in an El Nino year, so it's going to be a record-breaking year.
So things are happening around the world, right? We have forest fires happening. The Canada forest fires are still in play. Air quality changes from day to day in Connecticut where we live, because if you look at the map on Google Maps, you could see the smoke cloud and where it's going.
There have been some days where we couldn't go outside.
Yeah, like today is actually not a good day.
Yeah.
The air quality is pretty low today. Now, you have a lot of people now becoming aware that global warming is legit and it's affecting our daily lives. And here we are doing nothing about it.
Yeah.
The average citizen, like people like me and you, what the hell can we do about it? This is a $1 billion, trillion effort that's got to be taken on by governments around the world. We're just...
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we're doing nothing about it. We're doing enough to sort of convince ourselves that we're doing something about it. And it's also, the question is, well, what should we be doing about it? The short answer is more than we're doing, but there is some discussion about what exactly we should be doing. There's a lot, the devil's in the details, right? There's a lot of details to be talking about. And who's the we that you're referring to? The United States? Western countries,
every government, globally. I mean, of course, it's got to be. I mean, look, it's got to be. So, if what are we doing compared to what is India and China doing, who they're the up and comer, CO2 releasers? China now releases more CO2 than any other country in the world. But there's low hanging fruit, though. There's things that we could be doing that aren't super complicated, don't require immense technology. It could be regulation changes and things like that. That is just literally pen strokes to make these things happen. But we are in a situation.
I don't think the low-hanging fruit's going to cut it, though.
No. But we should at least be leaning heavily into it. Steve, I'm all about like us spending trillions of dollars doing this. Like this needs to be a global effort.
Yeah.
We're seeing, more and more meetings, among governments talking about it and everything. But again, nothing big is happening.
The only thing that's really going to work is when the technology makes it economically cost effective to do the right thing, right? That's really where we need to be focusing our efforts. But there's a lot of moving parts to that. It's not, we can't just wait around for technology to solve it for us. We do need to make sure that we are investing in the research that will continue to improve the technology, which is happening. But also we need to, we know this because we wrote the book, The Skeptic's Guide to the Future. And one of the things that we learned really, delving deep into the history of how technology changed over time is that oftentimes, people assume that one technology replaces another because it's inherently superior, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it might just be that it's more cost effective, or it's more convenient, or the supply chains were there, or whatever. But also, it's about infrastructure, right? So, like for example, arguably, the internal combustion engine beat out over electric vehicles 100 years ago because the infrastructure was there, and really the electrification infrastructure wasn't there. So the question is, how do we create the infrastructure for a green economy to make it more cost effective to do the low carbon thing? So like one thing that we definitely should do is update our grid. That is again going to cost probably hundreds of billions of dollars, and changing the regulation. It's from in the U.S. anyway, it's remarkably difficult from a regulatory point of view to lay more transmission lines because it goes across multiple states, multiple jurisdictions. It gets bogged down. Yeah, there's no federal agency that could say this is approved, make it happen. That's as you say, that's a stroke of the pen kind of thing. Yeah. We need a federal agency that has sort of eminent domain, the power to just say, we need a line here and it's going to happen. I don't care what the local governments say, we supersede you. That's a pure regulatory thing that will help. And we need to just invest the money. And there was the infrastructure investment, which did have some money for this. There was the Inflation Reduction Act, which had more, incentives for this, and it is helping. It is working. It's just not fast enough.
No, none of it is fast enough. Yeah, but think about what it'll take to get China to stop building coal-fired plants.
So China is building more green energy than most of the rest of the world combined, right? So China is building a lot of wind and solar. The problem is they're also building coal-fired plants. Yeah. So they're expanding their energy production, and they have made it clear. It's like, okay, yeah, we'll start phasing out coal, in 2050 or so. Maybe that is moving up just because, again, the technology is advancing so quickly. But they're not going to not build coal plants just for the environmental impact. Yeah, they're building wind and solar because it's cheap, and because they're technologically becoming leaders in this, and because they've cornered the raw material markets for those industries. So that's another thing. There's a lot of moving parts here. It's like we have to think about who's going to make the batteries. Where's the raw material coming for those batteries? Who controls those supply chains? You can't just rapidly turn over massive industries without it being disruptive.
It's going to be disruptive.
It's going to be massively disruptive.
But we have to be willing to have it be disruptive. Yeah. And again, this is the very beginning of all the bad things that global warming is going to do. Yeah. Like we're noticing changes, to our weather patterns here in New England, right? It's been incredibly wet. Just not typical, like very atypical weather is happening all over the place.
Yeah, and we're not even seeing really. It's really like Arizona, Texas, Florida. But they're the red zone, right? You look at the weather maps, like they're all in red because they're dangerous levels of heat. 100 degree plus, 110 degree plus, in Phoenix. These are dangerous temperatures, and this is putting further stress on our energy infrastructure, because that's, air conditioners are expensive to run. So we have a lot of decisions to make in terms of like where to put our money. Like there's for example, a very meaningful debate to be had about, should we be putting our resources in full electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids? From one analysis, you could make, I forget the exact number, but it's like 8 plug-in hybrids for every one full electric vehicle, and you would reduce CO2 way more by doing that.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, we got to follow the math. We got to follow the science.
So if we're limited in terms of our supply chains, in terms of like, well, how many batteries can we make? so this gets to another issue where it's one thing to say this is where we need to be, right? We need to have all electric vehicles, all green energy, decarbonize our steel making, blah, blah, blah. The other question is, how do we get from where we are now to there? And it's not necessarily a straight line.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different pathways we can take to get there. And if we don't choose the right pathway, and that involves things like, for now, like, is it okay to build a natural gas powered plant if it's replacing a coal fired plant? Nobody likes that idea. Nobody, environmentalists likes that because it's still burning a fossil fuel. But a lot of our CO2 reduction has come from shifting coal to natural gas.
Yeah.
Maybe for 5-10 years, we need to do that, whatever it takes to shut down coal. Maybe we need to build more hybrids, more plug-in hybrids, and not be the purists and go straight for full battery electric vehicles. Maybe we need more nuclear for a while. We need to at least maintain our infrastructure. We need to do all of these things. It's the pathway. It's not just the final destination, because we have to limit the total amount of CO2 that eventually gets released.
Yeah,
that's the key. And we can't just do it ourselves, meaning the United States. The world's got to do it.
The world has to do it.
The world has to do it. And how does that happen?
That buy-in is going to be one of the most difficult things to ever take place.
Yeah, I think it's only going to happen if we make it cost-effective and technologically feasible.
I agree.
The right decision environmentally has got to be the easiest and the best decision. People aren't going to do it. China basically said they're not going to do it for the environment. They're only going to do what's best for them and their economy.
I totally agree. Yeah, so that's it. So we need those technologies in order to make it so it is the better path.
Yeah, and it's happening. It's just a matter of, again,
it's slow. It's happening slowly.
How bad is it going to get before it gets better?
I think
that's really the question.
I think it's going to get really bad.
It's going to get really bad, but it's still a question of, like, exactly how bad is it going to get? And here we are now, right? Like, we're nowhere near the peak warming we're going to get. And already it's like, geez, Canada's on fire. A lot of the world is suffering from unsurvivable temperatures. The Middle East, we're like focusing on America. The Middle East is having temperatures that are literally unsurvivable. Like, you can't be outside, and they have like the heat equivalent, where it's a combination of humidity and temperature, and it's like in the 100, like what it feels like, it's over 150 degrees.
Yeah.
It's like the literal temperature is like 115, but it feels like 150 because of the humidity, and that's
it's going to kill a lot of people.
It's going to kill thousands of people, if not more.
More than that.
And we're just getting started.
Just getting started. I'm 54 years old. I have, hopefully, I have quite a number of years left in front of me.
Long enough that we'll see maybe see the worst of it before
I
it's
am
get better.
Legitimately thinking, like, I might need to move north.
Yeah.
We might need to move north. That's it. Everybody can't do it. Better do it early, Yeah. Imagine living in Florida right now.
Yeah, I don't know that I would buy oceanfront property in Florida right now.
No way.
That'd be a good investment.
No, Florida's got big problems coming. But I looked at the map of the United States, and I looked at, like, the whole week, like where the red zone's going to be.
Yeah.
That red zone is scary. That red zone means you could die.
Yeah. If you're not in an air-conditioned environment, it's life-threatening.
And it's worse for the young and the old.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So our point here, and what our takeaway here for you guys is, raise awareness, educate more people by talking to them about it.
Well, the number one thing that, like, definitely as Americans that we can do is think very carefully about who you vote for.
Yeah.
Because one of our political parties, the Republican Party in this country, is the most sort of global warming denial party in the world.
Yeah. That's right.
So who you vote for has a massive effect on at least U.S. policy, which I do think has then a downstream effect on other countries, on the rest of the world. We do have to be leaders in this to some extent. So we're at a critical juncture right now. Like, the next election could really decide the fate of our planet, in a very real way.
My stance, like, the politics thing needs to be discussed. My stance is, I don't care about political parties. It's like, I don't care about any football team on the planet either. You know what I mean? Like, my association with politics is who could do the best job, who is going to do the things that this world needs and our country needs. I think the average person...
There's a stark difference.
But it's a really good intellectual position to be in, where you
totally, disconnect yourself from political parties.
Yeah, you're not tribal, you're not partisan.
Yeah, get
it's just
rid
like,
of that.
what's your ideas? What's your competency? What are you planning on doing? Let's go from there, and not voting for a team. I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's not the world we live in.
Yep.
And that's a problem. People tend to team up and then support and vote for their team.
But once you do that, though, once you divorce yourself of the team mentality in
it's
politics,
It's so freeing.
But the political team mentality is the strongest team mentality that there is. By the way, there's something about politics that makes people be ravenously loyal to a party, which is ridiculous.
Well, religion does it as well.
Religion, again,
absolutely.
But the idea here is, we should be trying to move towards that, and we need to counsel people to learn how to disinvest themselves from a political party.
I mean, the good news is the independents are on the rise, and the actual people who identify as one of the two major political parties is decreasing.
Yeah.
I hope that's a good sign, that the more people identify as independent, the more they'll become actual swing voters, like moderate swing voters. That's what we need. But then, of course, we run into the issue of gerrymandering, where at least on certain levels of for the House, it doesn't matter because the districts are so gerrymandered that they're locked into one extreme or the other. So we have you're right, we have to solve some political problems in order to really solve this, because this is a political problem. Global warming it's not really the technological problems, the science problems, and the economic problems. We have our head wrapped around it pretty well. There are a lot of choices to make, as I said, but it's not like we have no idea what to do. Like, we really know what to do.
We know enough.
It's a political problem. It's having the political will.
It's getting it done, of course.
It's having the political will to make some choice. Say, okay, yeah, we should invest $1 trillion in a grid and change our regulations.
And we should be doing it happily.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a good investment.
This is the part where it becomes you get so frustrated and angry, because we are seeing the predictions that the meteorologists made come into reality.
Right.
It's happening. People are going to be dying.
Right.
Forest fires. It's out of control. But in view of that, the fact that minds aren't being changed proves to you that being loyal to a political party it's damaging.
Yeah, but although minds are being changed, if you look at polls, people are becoming more concerned about global warming.
But the politicians aren't changing their minds.
Politicians aren't changing because of the gerrymandering, and that's a problem. But just to finish with one thought, so we've been doing this long enough, and again, part of the role that we play as skeptics and science communicators is what we call institutional memory, right? Because people, the public collectively has sort of a very short-term memory. But, we've been doing this for a long time. It's like, we want to remember what people were saying 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because it matters. Like the fact that, the UFO proponents are saying the same thing now that they were saying 40 years ago is very useful information. So it's fascinating to look at the debate that was happening 10 years ago and 20 years ago. 20 years ago and even 10 years ago, the global warming deniers made very specific predictions, right? They were collectively, most of them, saying global warming isn't real. At the time they were saying we're in the middle of a pause, which was never true, and that this is just a blip and it will, everything will equilibrate, and the climatologists were saying the temperature is going to continue to warm. It's going to continue to go up. And now we unequivocally know who was correct.
Yeah.
The global warming deniers were wrong.
Yep.
Their prediction was wrong. The climatologist prediction was correct, right? Now they'll say, oh, what about the ice sheets haven't melted and whatever like that. They'll cherry pick whatever, some nuances about tipping points, whatever. The bottom line is, if you look at the actual temperature, the climate scientists who warned about global warming were absolutely correct. The climate deniers were absolutely wrong. History has really settled this issue. We really need to just move on. And the only debate, the only meaningful debate to be happening at this point in time is what is the best pathway forward.
Yep.
That's it. How do we reduce this, the CO2 release as much as possible? How do we want to reduce that peak warming? We know that we're going to turn it down eventually. It's really all about that peak warming at this point, and what are the negative consequences of that peak warming. And we need to flatten that as much as possible. We are nowhere near as much as possible.
Yeah,
nowhere near where we could be with the technology that we already have. And the only way to make that happen really is to get politically active.
So
at least think very carefully about who you're going to vote for. Talk
to your friends and family. Try to educate them. Try to, don't don't be a dick, right? That's what skeptics say. Like be kind. People don't know how uneducated they are, but try to educate your people about global warming, and maybe you'll change a few minds. And if enough people do it, you might be voting in the right people to make these changes that we need. I was really surprised to see that the United States wasn't the leader in dealing with global warming. We should be, in my opinion, like setting the standard.
Yeah,
and we're not there yet.
Yeah. There have been some movements in the right direction, but we're not there yet. So, and it's only going to get hotter.
Yeah.
And that will literally turn up the heat, on this issue.
Absolutely.
It'll just be, later than we would want it to be, but it'll eventually be, again, the hotter it gets, the more undeniable global warming gets, and the more, the fact that it's a real problem. This is like, oh, my life is being directly affected by this. It changes the
not
equation.
To be a downer.
Yeah.
Not to be a downer. But we are watching gun violence happen almost every single day in the United States, and it's not changing any minds. People are absolutely capable of burying their heads in the sand, and global warming is I'm scared about that.
It's all about that 5% in the middle, right? I mean,
you're right.
You're right. There are two, pretty much most, 80 whatever percent of people are going to be locked in one way or the other. But if in the U.S., we're very close to the line. All we really got to do is move that middle.
Yeah.
And it makes a huge difference. So we're always trying to persuade the persuadable. That's our target. And there's a lot of persuadable people out there.
Yeah.
All right.
There it is.